it's time to do the podcast. Come on. Good job.
I just want to congratulate Carly for not wearing a sweatsuit this week.
Yes. You know what? I actually thought about that before I put on my clothes. I was like, I can do better. I can do baggy jeans and a baggy shirt.
Carly showed up in her fucking Friday's best today, okay?
I'm looking for, okay, athleisure.
I went to work in my athleisure today. No, I love your sweatsuits.
Thank you.
Okay, you're a sweatsuit queen.
I've really invested into sweatsuit living. I just want to be comfortable at all times, and I work from home.
Yeah, she's a work from home girl.
There's no reason to be putting on real clothes every day other than the fact that I think it actually does help with my mental health to put on real clothes.
Yeah. What's up, sister?
We're just experiencing a little bit of the vulnerability hangover
from last week.
Sharing some very personal shit.
Yeah. You know what, though? The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I don't know what else anyone would say. So if anyone has any negative feedback, I think they probably just kept it to themselves.
And also, at this point, pretty much all the people who are paying attention to us at all actually love us.
Okay, come on. Have a little faith that someone that doesn't know us is listening.
Okay, I will. I'll give some room.
Yeah, but I'm really happy we did it. I'm grateful that we are taking the time, and I think that talking about Ryan is, we love to do it, but it's also how we speak about him, I think, is in a very thoughtful and loving way.
Yeah.
And that's to be expected. He's our brother, but...
Yeah, well, we're also protective of something that's come up for me recently in a couple different scenarios when I've been reflecting on my relationship with Ryan, and like some of the things that really trigger me to this day are when I feel he's being misrepresented or misunderstood. It triggers me so much because anybody who listened to the last episode will understand like that was just such a theme of his life. And so now I like overcorrect because I want people to finally have the opportunity to know him for who he really was in his spirit and like his loving, beautiful energy. So
Carly wanted to read you his poetry.
Well, I really wanted to read at least one of the poems because I find it annoying to be talking about someone constantly.
Yeah.
And not getting to hear from them. And obviously, you won't be able to hear Ryan's voice, or his thoughts straight from his brain unless I read them to you. Okay, so for context, I'm about to read one of Ryan's poems. It's short. Please stay with me.
It's really short.
And he wrote this when he was 15 years old. So I just want people to be wowed by that.
Yes.
Because he wrote this when he was 15 years old and it's really gorgeous. It's called House of Mirrors. Okay, it goes. I can't smile because this is a serious poem.
You want me to read it?
No.
Don't you dare.
Okay, this is called House of Mirrors. Volumes of reflection and regret leave me lost. In a house of mirrors with all of my signals crossed, a dizzy set of images blurs together and starts to melt into fear and discomfort because I'm staring at myself. Confusion comes into play, don't know the move to make, because every time I take a step, there are 10 more steps to take. Crawling through the house of mirrors, unable to break free, because I can't see through the glass, but the glass can see through me.
He's so fucking ill, dude.
The glass can see through me.
He really...
House of Mirrors.
He has ones that I wish that everyone had the attention span for because they're a couple pages long, but they are so... Love and
Life is gorgeous.
Love and Life is...
Love.
Is it Life and Love?
It's Life and Love. So that was just a little piece of Ryan that as I was listening through the last episode, I was wishing that I had a little bit of his essence in there. So I wanted to sprinkle it in here so that people could hear some of his brilliance and his perspective on life. But yeah, last week was a long story and it felt like we could barely even scratch the surface of anything because how can you sum up 32 years of life and then also add in your perspective as siblings and contribute your experience and explain everything that you've gotten out of it and everything. So today we wanted to just maybe fill in a couple more blanks that we felt we might have left undone or unfinished. and also move into a little bit of how it's impacted us and maybe talk about some of the work that we're starting to get into now. And also some new characters that we've added into the mix.
Yay!
Yay! So I think one thing that both of us felt like we didn't touch on in last week's episode was some of the reality of what it's like being incarcerated and being in prison. And from our understanding, from all of our conversations and life experience with our close loved ones who, we've walked alongside their journeys incarcerated, we just had a little bit more coloring in the picture that we wanted to do. Namely, we talked a lot about Ryan's depression, and obviously it would be enough to just be depressed because you're wrongfully convicted and wrongfully incarcerated and you're losing your life. And then on top of that, the abuse that these guys and women, I can't even fathom for the women, that they're experiencing in these facilities because of such a lack of accountability for any of the staff. I think a lot of people wouldn't know this, but there weren't cameras set up in prisons and jails until very, very recently. And even now, if you request footage, they're always broken. They weren't working that day. If you know an incident happened with your loved one between the staff and your loved one, or if your loved one was hurt or abused in any sort of way, anytime you try to move forward and get any sort of evidence, all the cameras weren't working, this isn't,
I mean, that's a huge thing for litigating cases against the CDCR, is just getting your hands on the actual evidence. You know what I mean? And there are accounts of abuse that are being litigated right now in our family that we can't speak on, but that's a huge thing, is even just getting your hands on necessary evidence that would implicate them in their wrongdoing, in their negligence, in their abuse, in their cover-up, like all of those types of things,
Yeah. And if you are someone who's paid attention over the past couple years to societal discourse about police misconduct just out in society, in everyday life, on the street, in wide open daylight where someone can film them with their phone. You know, if you've been paying attention to that conversation and you've been able to see how easy it is for police officers to take a leave of absence at maximum, usually, let alone face prosecution for serious crimes that they're committing. And the amount of misconduct in how they're handling people just in general, and the abuse and all of that, that is to an extreme in prisons and jails. There's no one watching, filming with a phone that can stand up for these people. And so I just wanted to add that in, because that is something that Ryan faced, was a lot of abuse, physical, but also psychological. And that can come in a lot of different forms. But I think that was important for us to include, because we just want to paint a clear picture of what goes on in these places. And also, of course, there's violence between incarcerated individuals based on a lot of different things. Oftentimes just based on the fact that they don't have what they need. They don't have the food or the nutrients that they need. They don't have the time in the sunshine. They don't have the mental stimulation. They don't have the emotional support. They don't have
the physical touch. That's necessary for emotional regulation. The sun exposure, like you said, there's so much that goes into it. The crazy thing is once you crack it open and you start to dive, you're like, oh shit, you know what I mean? And you start to go deeper and deeper, and there are all these layers, and you start to understand just how built this system was. It was perfectly designed to be what it is. This isn't a mistake. You know what I mean? And it goes so deep. Our food system, our kids eating state food in elementary school, middle school, high school, what they're consuming, it's everything. You know what I mean? And I won't get into all of that because I'm really not even qualified to speak on it in some ways. But you dive into it and you see that there's so many layers, and everything was of injustice at so many levels and ages. And it just fucking sucks, honestly.
So we just wanted to
quickly touch.
Just fill in that gap a little bit. And I think we also really wanted to talk about how it's really important for us to represent Ryan's innocence because it's his truth and it's his reality. And it matters that it's acknowledged. And I wish, and we all wish, that he would have been exonerated while he was alive. But we're still going to speak on his truth.
For sure. And I think, you know, speaking as a family member who went through the whole thing, the experience turns into you're just treading water and surviving the heartbreak of the day-to-day experience that he's having. So you give weight to, like, I was a kid when this was happening, you know? And so I feel like I said in the last episode, I didn't understand the magnitude. And I feel like I started to understand the magnitude a few years before he passed, which is understandable, 18, 19, you know? And I'm going through my own kind of rebirth and revolution inside of me. And you start to see things so much clearer, you know, as you're able to meet yourself at a deeper place. And so you're able to meet everybody else around you at that place too. And the innocence part of it was, for me, so overwhelming and heartbreaking. And it turned into me just trying to survive the situation alongside everybody and inside of myself. And then you get to this place in your life where you're sitting so sober in this reality today that I have and that you have and that we all have. And I've had this for years now of, wow, this person really died after doing 13 years for something that they didn't do. And he really never saw that through. You know, it's done. And so like that hits you different, you know, it just hits you different. And I'm so grateful to be able to feel my feelings and to process that. And it's so painful when you have to, in the moments of process, you know, because it's unfair. It's really unfair.
Yeah. So it's important that we continue to acknowledge his innocence and talk about it. And at the same time, I definitely want to make clear that fighting for innocence and caring about wrongful convictions is its own issue.
Yeah.
That's wrapped up and deeply entrenched with a million different other things, but that really is its own issue. And there are a million other issues that we care about in regards to the criminal injustice system, shall we say, like you said last time. And so we don't only care about people who have been wrongfully incarcerated.
No.
We care about everybody who's being dragged through that system and their families and their loved ones and the impact that it really does have on society. It's so crazy because people who have not been personally affected by it, meaning they don't have a really close loved one who is currently incarcerated or was incarcerated at any point, are under the false impression that this issue does not affect them.
Yeah. It's a public safety issue. Like,
it's an everything issue.
It's a public health issue.
Exactly.
It's everything, you know, it's
a public health issue.
It's a community issue.
Yeah.
They are our community members.
Yeah. And not just because with our morals and values, we should care because everyone should care about everybody in society, even though that is what we think. But on a very real, tangible level, we are paying for them to be incarcerated. We are paying for the lives that they're living out of our own pockets. When you go to work, money is coming out of your check to pay for those people. And you are contributing to who they become in a very real way. And you are contributing to the lives that they're living right now and how that will affect them. And obviously, there is choice. You know, each individual who's incarcerated, their family members, their loved ones, their friends, their community members, everyone's making decisions for themselves. And at the same time, our baselines are very different.
Yeah.
Our perceptions on life are very different. Our needs are very different. There's just, we are actively contributing to who these people become. And then they come home and they actively contribute to how our communities feel. And whether you feel safe or not when you walk outside, when you walk around, in your car, in your house, all of these things, like we're all affected by these things every single day. And so it really matters. Even if it's not just something that you want to think about all the time or that you just naturally care about for whatever reason, like even if you don't feel super inclined to it, it does affect you.
Yeah. I was saying to Sarah today that not everybody is going to be ready for change in prison or out of prison. You look at the world around you and not everybody has come to a place where they want to be better, you know, but giving people the opportunity if we're already investing so much money and resources into these facilities staying open and being open, having there be ample opportunity for anybody who's even curious to touch something else and try something new, just has to be.
And well, you have to be exposed to something new to ever be open to it.
Yes, that's so much of the work that you and I think, are
wanting to invest
ourselves in
and starting to.
Yeah.
So we can even talk about that. So obviously a huge part of the impact that Ryan left on us and our family was the knowing of the humanity that exists behind those walls that's largely hidden from everybody. And I've said this a bunch of times since I've started going into the facilities, but something that was on my mind from honestly, like right when Ryan passed away or very soon after, up until this past year when I finally pulled the trigger and decided to start reconnecting with the community, was the knowing that people were behind those walls still and their lives are kind of wasting away. And I was so focused for all of that time that Ryan was incarcerated on just trying to get through it and get him home and figure out how we could fix everything and build a new life, and just imagining what that would look like. And I've said to the people that I've met whenever I've gone into these facilities that I felt like everything that I had done with Ryan and worked for with him was for nothing because he lost his life. And it just felt like a slap in the fucking face after years of showing up and just walking through the trenches of life with somebody and feeling like, what was that all for? And I kind of quickly realized, well, it can be for the millions of people that are still in that position. And so that motivated me to feel like there's more work to be done here and it doesn't have to end with Ryan, and that I can use what happened to him as a motivating and mobilizing force in my life to connect with people and see what happens, And so Casey and I had seen videos of people going into facilities and connecting with the women and men who were incarcerated. And we were really curious about it for a long time. But COVID happened and all those programs were virtually shut down. They didn't receive visits. Like during COVID, prisons were completely locked. And we kind of weren't ready yet anyways to go back in, just because we were deeply entrenched in our grief and it was just so raw that I don't know that we were ready to really dive into it that soon anyways. But we saw last year that some of the programs were restarting and that people were going back in. And there was fear there, obviously, but it just felt like it was time to re-engage. And I think I've said this maybe in another conversation that we've had, but there is something really healing about being around people who can understand a core wound of yours and where you don't have to overthink or second guess how to share your life experience.
Yeah.
And you don't have to articulate it perfectly, and you don't have to package it up beautifully, and you don't have to feel like you need to make an impact in 2 seconds, but you can just exist there with the kind of energetic understanding of somebody and knowing that they understand you on a certain level that is, I think, a core desire for humans, like we've talked about so many times, is that feeling of belonging and safety, which is so interesting because most people would assume that if you were going into a prison, you would feel very unsafe. And it's so the opposite when I go in. And that's not to say that prisons are safe. Like, no. I don't want to paint that picture because that's not real. And that really, I think, diminishes the urgency to make
prison safe.
Or just completely transform what a prison is and it not even be that anymore at all. But when we go in there, we feel so seen and so heard and so held and so safe. And it has just added this element to my life that is so deeply enriching and fulfilling and satisfying to my spirit after years of loneliness and perceived isolation in my experience. And it really has built a community for both of us. And it's definitely motivated both of us to start to explore all the other ways that we can invest ourselves into this moving forward, and ways that we can continue to give to this community, because we get so much from it. And you always say that when you go in, and I always think it, but you kind of always say it, which is that we go in there to share love, but we always get so much more than we give.
Oh my God. They're giving me what they have no idea what they're giving me.
And it's not just because they're some uniquely special group of people that whatever. It's because anybody who's willing to be real and raw about life, and accountable and honest and empathetic and non-judgmental, like, it's just really an unparalleled experience. I haven't found it anywhere else yet in my life. And that's not to say that there aren't incredible communities out there where stuff like this is going on, healing. And I know that there are, but this is just a place that we've found it. And
I mean, I felt like when he passed, I had survivor's guilt or something. I don't even know how to describe it. It was so I'm really big on, I loved visiting, and I tried to spend as much time as I could with him. And I'm very big on like spaces, and that space feels very sacred to, I think, all of us, you know? But if any of my guys at Lancaster are listening to this, you know this.
I hope so.
I know. But,
hi guys, if you are.
But I drove up to Lancaster multiple times. Carly came with me probably all the times. And I sat outside after he passed and just kind of like honored that space, and somewhere that I came to for so many years as a meeting ground to spend time with him, you know, and he was taken from me so young that
I just want to emphasize what you just said, because I felt like that came out really fast. But after Ryan passed away, Casey, and I went with her, would drive up and sit outside of the prison in her car because she couldn't visit Ryan, but she wanted to feel close to him. And she shared that with the guys when we went in there one time. And the next time we came in, we had multiple people that we had never met be like, I heard that you came up here and sat outside. Like, the guys were talking about that.
Yeah, we really made a name for ourselves on that yard.
It's going to make me cry. I find that I just love it, because every time we go in and we start talking, the guys are like, you remind me so much of my sister.
Yeah.
Or of my auntie or my mom or whatever it is, like somebody who's been really loyal to them. And that, and we're always like, well, you remind me so much of my brother. Even if they're completely different people, there's just an element of understanding there for the struggle and the pain and the hurt. And it just feels familial.
Yeah, it does. I felt like I was leaving a band of brothers behind.
Yeah.
And Carly and I had an experience in 2020. She was kind enough when COVID started she booked a trip to Tucson, Arizona at this really dope hotel. It was beginning of COVID. We drove to Tucson, Arizona, and part of that drive was through the bitter desert out there. And prisons are in very isolated random places in the corners of, that's another tactic of just getting them out of the way, getting them out of sight, you know? And we drove by a prison called Ironwood, which is in Blythe, which sounds so exactly what it is, just dark. And I remember both of us started crying so hard. It was a year and a half after he passed. And I felt like when I drove by and I looked at the buildings, I was leaving them behind. Like I was leaving my brothers behind, and I was going on vacation, and I knew they were in there, and I knew what they were up against. And it was the bitter heat in August, probably 115 degrees outside. And I just...
Probably no air conditioning. Very regularly.
Yeah. And I had such a palpable response, and so did she. And that was such a core feeling inside of me, of feeling like I had left them behind, like family members that I had spent a decade with, like a very, from 9 to 22. I say this to the guys all the time, at every major holiday I spent with them and their families. Day after my 21st birthday, I definitely stumbled in there, probably halfway drunk, like trying to tell him about the night. And he was laughing so hard. And there was so many important memories and moments that I had in there with them and their families. And so that was such a driving force for me, despite my fear and hesitation and just being in that space without him. I was very scared,
It is very like discombobulating too.
Yeah.
To see the guys walk through the door and he's not with them.
Oh my gosh. But my first experience, and I think this is a really good segue.
Yeah.
My first experience was so spiritual, and it has opened my heart to so much. And I feel like we should tell them about it.
Yeah.
Because it was a really impactful prison circle for both of us.
I think it was probably it was definitely the most impactful that we've had up until this point.
For sure. So last October, Carly and I went down to Calipatria, which is about 40 miles north of Mexico.
Neither of us had ever been to this facility before.
No, Ryan had been to 6 different facilities, never to this.
I hadn't even heard of it.
I think I had heard of it, but we went to a concert and we drove to the desert.
We went to a concert and we had the most amazing night ever at this concert. J. Cole, we spent $50 on this concert and J. Cole came out, freaking
Khalid, Snow Allegra. It was a black concert, which if you're familiar with him, he's the one that spells his.
Some people call him Six Lack.
Yes, he's the one that spells his name Six Lack. So I don't know. Anyways, he's one of our favorite artists.
Yeah,
and so we bought tickets months prior, and it happened to line up perfectly where the prison circles, the next 2 days were right after it. So we went to the concert. Carly forgot her sneakers. So we were at SoFi. We drove back from SoFi at 11 o'clock at night to get her sneakers, which was fine. It's part of the adventure. And then we drove to Indio, to the desert. Probably got there at 2:15, 2:30 in the morning. And
it was a marathon.
It was such a marathon.
We were exhausted, and I was working in the car the entire way there with a hotspot.
She was
on my computer.
And for me, it was such an emotionally charged. Carly had been to a couple prison circles already, so it wasn't her first time back in a prison. But for me, I'm like, this is my first time back in this space. I don't know what to expect. She was saying to me, it won't be in a visiting room. It's going to be, because she had never been to one in a visiting room. So I didn't expect to be in a visiting room. I thought it would be a different kind of space. Long story long, because stories are great.
And because we never are concise.
I know. We probably got 3 hours of sleep, woke up at 6:15 in the morning, drove an hour down to Calipat. And
so we went in, and Casey and I have very interesting dynamic and boundaries when we go in with each other, because we want to make sure that we're not leaning on each other too much and that we're allowing each other to have individual experiences in there and build community for ourselves and feel independent and like we're getting what we both need as individuals out of the experience. So we try not to lean on each other too much. And with that said, that being her first time, I knew that you were going to be emotional. And you were. And we went in, and it was in a visiting room. And it was in a visiting room that looked just like the other visiting room, which is not surprising because pretty sure all of the visiting rooms in California look somewhat alike.
But yeah, I was inconsolable.
Yeah. So we saw the guys start walking in, and she immediately lost it. And Casey doesn't like to be seen crying that much. So she was kind of trying to go off on her own and have a moment, but there was really nowhere to go. So it was kind of this tough thing where like all of these men were filing into the room and trying to find their seats, and we were all setting up, and Casey was crying really hard. And this very kind man came over and asked if she was okay. And he was like, I hope we're not upsetting you. Like, I hope our presence isn't overwhelming you. And Casey was like, I swear to God, it's so much deeper than that. It's not, you as an individual are not panicking me or throwing me off. And over the course of that day, we had the opportunity to share about Ryan. And there were just some really deep souls in that room. People who were doing really hard work and self-reflection. But over the course of that day, there were some beautiful conversations had. And there was a point in the middle of the day where the police officers barged in very intensely and said that the day was ending short, like halfway through. And we were all really thrown off because we had this kind of really open-hearted experience going, and it just felt like we were getting more and more and more comfortable to all of a sudden there being this really stark, harsh energy that was like, no excuses. There's no way to get out of this. There's no compromises being made right now. The day's over. Leave. We're leaving. And that experience was really triggering for me because there's something about that lack of empathy that you can feel from somebody when you're looking at them and they are completely unwilling to even communicate with you as though you're with any level of respect or dignity. That specific energy is very
familiar in the worst possible way.
Yes. And for me, as someone who has deeply, deeply loved somebody in that space, who's known that they're having to meet that energy every single day of their life, the dehumanization and the intensity of that energy just triggered me so much. And I was having a hard time regulating myself in that moment, wanting to just honestly pop off at these people, but knowing that I couldn't at all. And I looked over and was able to connect with somebody who told me, we're going to be okay. And he had incredibly calming, assuring energy.
Yeah.
And I felt like, okay, I'm going to get through this and we're all going to be okay. And it was this really beautiful kind of exchange that I had. And we were able to come back the next day. And luckily, the facility allowed the same guys to come back in whose days were cut short. And so we got to know these guys better than normal because we had then extended time with them a second day. And we were able to work through like so many different exercises and have deeper conversation, just more time spent together. And that calm energy that I had met that first day, we were able to dive deeper into that person's story and that person's experience. His name is Christopher Lee Stone.
Let's give him a name, bro.
His name is Christopher Lee Stone.
That's my dog.
And he's become very important to us. And we learned that day that he was also wrongfully convicted. We were able to have a long conversation, and I was able to really get to a feel for where he was coming from and some of the stuff he had been through and the direction that he was heading in life and what he was investing himself into, his time and his energy and his focus and attention. And it was powerful. He was so driven to not just change himself and better himself, but also to invest himself in any community he was in, the community that he's currently in, still incarcerated. He feels a responsibility to support and help motivate and better anybody in his presence at any point in time. And it's powerful. It was a powerful energy that I met that day. And I just had the instinct, like, Christopher's for real. And when we left, I was like, Christopher told me that he is wrongfully convicted, and I have a really strong instinct about this, and let's look into it. And we've gone down this journey of,
I like immediately. So they were partners together, and I was with a different partner right next to them. So I kind of was like shooting the shit with him, and I had throughout the day, but I saw them having like pretty extensive conversation. And then when we left that day, I was just on a high of feeling like, wow, what an experience, what a group of people that I just met. I feel so connected to them. And we get in the car and she's like, Chris said that he's innocent. And immediately I was like, yeah, that tracks.
Mm-hmm.
That just tracks in my heart for some reason.
He was so invested in everything, both days.
And that's all to say that you trust but verify. So we got to look into it further. And I'm not kidding when I say this. When I read the preliminary forms online prior to reading the case, because I now have read the case twice, but I thought I missed pages when I was reading.
Yeah.
And he's currently serving a life sentence without parole plus 65 to life.
A life sentence without the possibility of parole. he will never, with the sentence that he has right now, have the opportunity to go home ever. It's death by incarceration.
Yeah. And so when I was reading through these initial documents, like I said, I genuinely thought I was missing something. And, you know, it was such a crazy experience for me and for her too. And she was the one that really took the initiative and reached out and got involved very quick. And I kind of trickled in my own way. And, you know, we've been lovingly involved in any way that we can since the day that, you know, we met him. And it brings me so much pleasure and joy and just gratitude to be a part of his life and a friend of his and a part of his journey. But having a brother that was wrongfully convicted and, you know, having him die in the system, it's still, when I was reading Chris's case, I couldn't believe that this shit happens.
We were like re-shocked. We were shocked all over again.
I was truly flabbergasted. Like, it hasn't happened to me and mine before. Just sitting there thinking, there's no way that this actually happened to this dude. You know what I mean? Like, he's really living this nightmare right now. And he's a wonderful ass person. And he's just, I'm so grateful to be riding with him, you know?
Yeah. And at this point, I just want to be clear, you know, we're being vague about his case because at this point in his journey, it's necessary to protect the avenues that are being walked down to advocate for him and to try and get him the support and the resources that he needs to get home to his family. And so we're introducing him because we want to advocate for him and we want everybody to know Christopher Lee Stone is innocent. And
but also if you want to know more about his case, please contact us.
Yes.
If you have any interest in getting involved in any way, we are looking for fucking fighters. And that can look a million different ways right now in how we're moving and the different avenues that we're exploring. But we're building an army, you know what I mean? And if you have any interest in learning more about him or his case or anything, you know where to find us, you know?
Totally. This type of shit needs an army behind it. It needs an army of support and an army of resources. And he's also gone through what Ryan went through about having people take advantage of him, lawyers mess up his appeal in different ways than Ryan's, but he's been through the ringer with representation and he deserves an army of support right now. And so Casey and I wanted to open up his story to you guys and just invite some more love in and
honestly, invite more prayers in.
Yeah.
If you don't want to get involved, that's okay. You know his name now. And if you are a praying person, you just add him to that list because
totally
the journey that these guys are on in there is one that I don't even have the words to describe. And I think that maybe you guys got a little bit of a taste of it last week hearing Ryan's story, but living that shit as an innocent person is, I have no words. So
totally
add him to that prayer list, baby.
And he's an LA native, Compton, California, and proud. He is
so proud.
And
he's the best.
He is
He's
best.
a beautiful ass person.
He is.
I love advocating for him. He's easy as fuck to fight for.
He is.
He's just a good dude.
He really is. And he's currently at Calipatria, like we said. And this is just the start of a journey, not just with him and making sure that he gets home to his family expeditiously, but also just reiterating how much our brother has opened us up to being able to share him with the world and share the experience that he worked hard for and make good of it and use it as, again, motivation to invest ourselves further into healing and love in this world. And
absolutely,
there's just one thing we're doing, but there are lots of other things that we are super excited about in the world of justice and reform. And we're excited to keep sharing as we move forward.
We have a lot of very fun dreams and plans, honestly, you know, but right now we're just kind of finding our footing in this. And it's been so healing for me to engage with my brothers and connect with them and, you know, have that almost family support. I feel like that I feel in there. I don't know why I have tears coming to my eyes, but it's a really, really special experience for me.
It is.
And I couldn't be more grateful. And I'm really, really excited to see how this morphs for us and who we meet along the way. It's so refreshing. You know, I know that we talked about competition a couple weeks ago, but the beautiful thing, like we said, is that we can create something anew in our own world And I'm just really excited to continue to run into like-minded people who are passionate about this stuff and, working from their heart center. And it's just a beautiful experience. It really is.
Yeah. And this is an invitation not just to talk about Christopher, but if anybody ever wants to learn more or talk to us about what we're doing or talk about anything, honestly, like please hit us up. We really do want this to be a connecting project in our lives and
a bridge.
A bridge. Totally. A starting important dialogue, not just in our community, but anybody who comes across this who doesn't know us, you're also totally welcome to reach out.
Yeah.
We really want to connect.
That would be dope.
Amazing.
Someone that doesn't know me, doesn't know us, just like wants to have a conversation about stuff or is curious. This is a bridge. I hope that our life experience can be a bridge between two communities that are loving and understanding and have a lot more in common with each other than they may even know,
Yeah. And we definitely feel the responsibility to build that bridge as well, because like we talked about in last week's episode, we have kind of had this really interesting juxtaposition of life experiences where we grew up in a really affluent community that doesn't have as many connections to the world of criminal justice reform or incarceration or a lot of the things that we grew up struggling through. And it just feels like an opportunity to start conversations where they're not being had as loudly and hopefully in a loving way that people feel welcomed into the conversation. And we have strong opinions, but we also do genuinely love people. And we want for people to feel welcomed into this conversation. And like, if they have the desire to learn or chat, my door's open, her door's open, and
my door is open, Bill.
It's really the goal. It's really the goal is to just start conversations that are long overdue.
Hell yeah.
Okay, well, I love you.
I love you too. Great chat.
Great chat. I love you, Ryan.
Love you, Ryan.
And to all of my dogs, if there's anybody listening who's currently incarcerated or who has been incarcerated or whose loved ones are incarcerated right now, there is life that is meant for you outside of those walls. And you can do this. I believe in you.
Okay. Well, I love you.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.